also our first. Just a little bit of information about him. He's a professor of law at Brunel Law School at Brunel University in London, and the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran. He was formerly a professor of law at the Transitional Justice Institute and a lecturer and senior lecturer at the Law School University of Leeds. Professor Rehman is the former head of Brunel Law School, the senior manager member of Brunel Senate, and the founding director of the Center for Security, Media, and Human Rights, which is an interdisciplinary at the Brunel University Research Center. In July 2018, Professor Rehman was elected by the United Nations Human Rights Council as the Special Rapporteur on Human Rights Situation in the Islamic Republic of Iran. Professor Rehman has a lot of publications, over 180 and authored and co-authored publications, which you can, of course, find online. And without further ado, we welcome you and yeah.
Thank you, Surya. Thank you for this very generous. So thank you for this generous introduction, Surya, and thank you for welcoming me yesterday. Just to clarify, would that be okay if I spoke for about 25 minutes to half an hour and then we give time for question and answers? Would that be, yeah? Because it has to be interactive rather than myself just speaking. And I think it's a mutually learning experience. So I would be grateful for your observations and comments. So let me introduce my lecture by two key messages. One, I'm saying that it's important that we distinguish between law and morality. It's often a challenge, and in particular in Muslim societies and in the context of Islamic law, that this discourse and this understanding is missing. And I often find it quite amazing that many of the leading scholars, when they talk about Islamic law, in one breath, they are conflating what is natural law or morality with positive law. So you may have come across, or even within state practices, states talk about Sharia. Now, what is the understanding of Sharia? And I would welcome your comments. To my mind, as I will explain to you, Sharia inherently is morality. It's not positive law. In other words, it is representing natural law doctrines. And the Sharia concepts have to be incorporated into positive law. And that is why, I mean, if you want to test this thesis, you will see the Sharia or Islamic law interpretations vary quite widely across the Muslim world. And that is because, natural law doctrines are inherently, a moral diktat, which is then interpreted and applied in a cultural specific context, right? We can discuss, there are many examples of that. So that's the one point. The other point which I wanted to make is to raise your awareness about the challenges, or you can call it risks, of an exclusive reliance upon religious moralities in positive lawmaking, right? So if you exclusively believe that you will incorporate religion into your laws, then there are serious risks. I mean, sometimes it may appear that I'm saying the obvious, but to many states and to many societies, that is not so obvious. All these slogans that we hear is that we want to have Sharia law. We want to have Sharia law. But what does it mean? They are saying exactly the things which I fear create tensions, because Sharia is subject to interpretation. And then if you're trying to apply that religious law into your positive laws, there will be risks and challenges. So these are the two key messages which I want to place. And before I go any further, I will read to you two quotations which highlight the points that I want to make. Now, the first quotation is from the 1957 report of the Committee on Homosexual Offences and Prostitution, which was chaired by Sir John Wolfenden in 1957. And the committee was looking at, the issue of non-penalization of prostitution, and it was looking at homosexual behavior in England and Wales. Now, the committee says, and I'm quoting here, it says, unless a deliberate attempt is made by society acting through the agency of law to equate the sphere of crime with that of sin, there must remain a realm of private morality and immorality, which is, in brief and crude terms, not the law's business. So the question is, to what extent law should overlap with what we perceive as sin? Should there be a sphere of private morality where people can do what they like so long as it is not harmful to others? Yeah. So that's the question. Now contrast that to a famous jurist, Lord Patrick Devlin, who was very opposed to what this committee had said on homosexual offences. He says that, and I quote him here, there is disintegration when no common morality is observed, and history shows that the loosening of moral bonds is often the first stage of disintegration, so that society is justified in taking the same steps to preserve its moral code as it does to preserve its government and other essential institutions. The suppression of vice is as much the law's business as the suppression of subservice activities. So what Lord Devlin is saying is that there is, in his understanding, there is a common morality of a society, and that must be preserved if we want to preserve the fabric of a society. And that is a real challenge, that to what should be the business of law? Should it be to preserve morality, or should it be only where harm is envisaged, right? So in other words, whether and to what extent a society or a community has the right to enforce moral behavior through its positive laws. So any immediate thoughts? If you want to say something, we can say now, but we can wait. But the question is, what you believe, should there be an essential moral value, or should there be a set of essential moral values which should be preserved through laws? And I will go on to give you some examples of where the problem lies, but that is essentially the question that we are trying to understand. Should laws only be posted when an individual's behavior creates harm or creates damage, for example, through violence or against others? Or could there be other justifications? For example, coherence of the society or a community, right? Take the cases of the three examples which were looked at by this committee on homosexual offences. The issue of adultery, homosexuality, and prostitution. Right? Now, you would find that in many societies, adultery is criminalized, homosexuality is criminalized, and prostitution is criminalized. Now, how do you view these activities if these reflect adult consensual behavior? Should they be punished? And in some countries, I regret to say that these activities carry the death penalty. I mean, the most serious punishment that could ever be are dispensed on those people who are, for various reasons, found guilty of these activities. Lord Devlin's argument has been that enforcement of a common morality is indispensable for social cohesion, regardless of the harm that it creates. So he would say that homosexual behavior is unacceptable. It destroys the moral fabric of the society. It damages our values. It is sinful, and therefore it should be illegal and criminalized. Similarly, he would say the same for prostitution. He would say the same for adultery, that because these are sinful practices, they should be criminalized and people should be punished for that. And that is where, the dilemma arises. Now, I have a number of fundamental problems arising from Lord Devlin's approach. One is, how do you establish morality? He's talking about common morality, and I think there were some colleagues who also pointed out in yesterday's conversation about the difficulty in establishing common morality. So you can take any country, you can take any society. For example, if you look at serious controversial issues such as blasphemy laws, right? Now, it's difficult to actually have a single common morality, even in the most extreme of cases. Like, for example, I come from Pakistan. We have blasphemy laws which carry the death penalty. But you would not find a single common morality which says that for somebody who blasphemes, there should be a mandatory death penalty. And some of you might know that for Section 295, it is a strict liability offense. So you don't even have to establish intent. When somebody blasphemes and it is established, then it carries the death penalty. So to establish a common morality, if you ask the people, I think they would believe that this is highly disproportionate as a punishment. So that argument is very problematic to say that, you want to preserve a morality, you want to have common morality, but where would you find it? Even in all of the cases that I'm going to mention to you now, you'll struggle to find a common morality. Then there is an issue about morality and its interpretation, particularly religious morality. Now, religious moralities and religions are subject to so many varied interpretations that you would struggle to have a religious argument built into lawmaking. See, that you would find quite difficult. Well, all religions and all philosophies and all adherents to these religions have this view of having the objective truth. They ultimately believe that this is the objective truth. This is the truth, and it is established objectively, right? You speak to your friends who are religious, and all of us in our private lives, when we believe in a certain faith, we think that is the truth. But objectively, it's very difficult to establish that. Is it not? We have all these religions and we have all these philosophies, but there are, someone who doesn't believe in that, they can challenge it and they say, how do you prove that? So that is another question. There are other problems. That are moral principles universally accessible? Are they not open to change, or are they static? So you see, the issue with natural law, and there has been a lot of debate whether natural law is subject to change, or is it static? Natural law remains the same, or it has remained the same. So that is something you have to understand, that when you talk about natural law doctrines, can we somehow change them? In my understanding, we can, see, contrary to many established views, because look at our views on morality. For example, the Greeks may have had a different understanding of slavery to what we now believe. They also said it is natural law, and we also believe in natural law. But our interpretation of natural law has changed. So what I'm saying to you is that the argument of morality or religious morality is very problematic or very difficult when it comes to incorporating it as positive laws, because our interpretations vary, because there is no test for finding the objective truth. Now, just to give you some examples and some of the issues that I have. Now, take the case of morality-based laws, and I'll present to you in the few minutes that I have a list of issues. Take the case of adult women marrying of their own choice. Now, in some countries, you may know or you may not know, women are restricted to marrying people of their own religion, or there are other restrictions. Even in some cases, I mean, in the case of Pakistan, we had a very famous case where my esteemed late Asma Jahangir was the lawyer. And there was this question mark whether an adult woman can marry of her own accord. That is a challenge. And this is driven from religious morality. There are still debates whether adult women can marry of their own choice. For example, if they want to marry someone outside of their religion. Certain laws, like the Iranian laws, they don't permit that. The same with the Pakistani laws, and I'm sure you can give other examples. What about the age of marriage, child and early marriages? We have a number of cases going on in Pakistan. In Iran, there's a big problem, the legal age of marriage being 13. So if you are relying on some kind of archaic interpretation, many people will disagree with me when I use the word archaic, but if you rely on religious interpretation, which are not in agreement to our contemporary understanding of human behavior, these marriages are actually unlawful. Child marriages are unlawful and they violate the dignity of the child. But they are still practiced based on morality. There are positive laws. Many other examples where women in particular suffer, such as divorce, post-divorce, maintenance, custody of children, guardianship. All of them are patriarchal, man-made, laws, because they claim that this is divine. This is the divine law. This is natural law, and then that has to be translated into positive law. There's a question mark about whether women can be political leaders, and this is a frequent argument whereby women are restricted in political discourse. In some countries, women cannot become political leaders. In some countries, they cannot become members of parliament. And in some countries, they cannot become judges, as in the case of Iran. So there is that religious morality which has been used to prevent women from political interference. Some other examples, more mundane, everyday example. Should there be laws to punish people who break the fasting regulations, the Ramadan month? Should there be, what is the justification? I may have some disability. I may have other issues. I may simply disagree with the fasting month and I eat in public. Should I be lashed or punished for that? And you find there are laws in some countries doing that. What about consumption of alcohol? Now, should consumption of alcohol carry punishments? And in some cases, even the death penalty, if you're a persistent if you're persistently breaching the law. I've already mentioned to you adult consensual sexual relations. Should that carry physical punishment and in some cases death penalty? So after all that, what I have tried to tell you is that there are certain risks and there are certain inherent challenges if you rely exclusively on a religious morality and try to make it as your positive laws. Yeah. So the message that I've given to you is that there is an inability to distinguish morality and law, and that inability is quite obvious if you look at the state practices of, I would say, a majority of the members of the OIC or Muslim majority countries, because somehow Sharia law, they call it as Sharia law, is somehow part of the legal system, you see. So I'm challenging all of these countries to say that, look, you have to rationalize the laws. The basic framework that you have to work within is the human rights framework. And I will come to my conclusions when I'm talking about the role of relationship of Sharia and human rights. Surya, how much time have I got left?
Right, actually, half an hour has passed.
Half an hour has passed. Okay, I'll try to be brief. Basically, what I'm saying to you is that Sharia is morality. You have to accept that morality. And if you accept it, then it will become easier for you to make reform possible. Because if you treat Sharia as divine, as God-given, then you will not be able to change. Yeah. And I acknowledge that this idea that I have presented to you is not completely original. Other people have said that, and importantly, Professor An-Naim has made a similar argument. But the issue that I have with Professor An-Naim, with great respect, he's an esteemed scholar. He regards that law is always secular. You see, he has, in his book Islam and the Secular State, that is his argument. But I disagree with it. And his idea is that law is secular, even in the context of countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia. Yeah. And he says that, okay, well, if you agree with, let's say, the Saudi or the Iranian law, that is bad secular law, but it is still secular. Now, if you equate being secular to whatever happens in this world, then that's fine. But secularism has a particular understanding, and I will come to that in 1 minute. But you have to go beneath the surface to understand what secular law is, or what law in fact is. I mean, have you ever considered the meaning of law? So we talk about law, but what is law? Law is effectively made by political authority. If you ask me, what are the laws of Ireland? I would look at the political authority. You can tell me who makes laws here, right? I can tell you of the laws made in Pakistan, for example, the parliament. I can tell you the laws that are made in the United Kingdom, the Queen in Parliament. And there is a rule of recognition, which everybody understands that if that law has gone through that particular process, that then becomes law. Nothing else is law then. Nothing else that is law is morality, basically. You have a discretion to follow or not to follow. Yeah. So you have to understand the meaning of law, and you have to understand that the relationship between law and morality is very complex. But when laws are made, they are not made in isolation. They are made because of a certain moral behind it. Do you see? I mean, look at any law. I mean, even the example of, when you're crossing the traffic lights, you see, there is a red sign, there's a signal of red sign, there's a green signal. You may say, okay, that law doesn't have a moral basis. Why do you have to stop at the red light? You see, but there is something behind it. There was an ethical, moral reasons why red was the light showing us to stop. And I know in some places it does not apply, right? Somebody told me that in some countries at red you can cross. Yeah. But the general idea of every law is that there is something behind that. Do you understand? There is an ethical, moral dimension. You see, you analyze for yourself at any law, you'll find that, right? So what I'm saying to Professor An-Naim is that all laws are positive laws. They are made by political authority. They are not always secular. Secular has a different distinction. And if I may just add that Professor An-Naim's theory of a secular state is also, in my view, needing a reconsideration, because law has not been associated to a state all the time. Law is not a product of state. Law has been with us since time immemorial, even in tribal societies. If I was a tribal leader and I said to you, you have to stay in this room for 24 hours, no food and no drinking, that would be the law. Yeah. So it is not confined to the state. It has been before the state. And the other point where I disagree with Professor Amin is that he doesn't give any justifications and an explanation as to how Islamic law was established in the first instance. Like, how was the Prophet Muhammad's Islamic State formed, right? So the question is, were all of the Prophet's laws and was all of his lawmaking secular? Because on his theory, there would be secular, you see. So I think it would be very difficult for us to say that Prophet was making secular laws, you see. I think the reality or the truth behind that is that the Prophet was making positive laws. They were inspired by divine, they were divinely inspired positive laws. You see, he was receiving instructions from the God. That's what we understand as a matter of faith. But ultimately, he was making positive laws for that society. And that makes our understanding clearer that when positive laws are made, they do not have any divine attachment to them. They just become laws. And therefore, you can change them. See, you can change them according to the needs of the society. If you had a similar divine inspiration, I mean, as Muslims, and I tell to all Muslim states that Prophet Muhammad was, in our belief, was the only prophet that came. And after that, no prophet would come. And the divine inspiration that he had was for that time. He made positive laws for that time. So now the context has changed. So we have to use our own moral judgments to make positive laws which are compatible to this society, not going back to the historic times, because then it will not be compatible, you see. So I think I would stop here. I would just make one final point about the views on secularism. I mean, this lecture is not about secularism, but what secularism must contain, and there are lots of critics of secularism. It is again just like religious morality. Secularism is also morality. You see, it's derived from our morals. But what we believe, and certainly I have argued, that secularism must contain inherent values of liberalism, pluralism, and importantly, the right to freedom of religion or belief for every individual. So it's a secularist setup which denies freedom of religion or belief. So we have many states who proclaim to be secularist, countries in Eastern Europe, for example. They have this claim of secularism, but they deny the right to freedom of religion or belief. So ultimately, secularism can only be successful in promoting human rights if the values that come from within secularism are actually part of the wider discourse in which we have incorporation of our ethical, cultural, including religious values. Because after all, what is human rights? It derives from our moral values, you see. And those moral values include religious values. But these religious values do not and cannot dominate the human rights framework. So I would end here, and I'm sure there will be lots of questions to answer. Thank you. Oh, right. Okay. So if somebody can moderate if they have questions. So. Yeah, right. Okay, very good. Thank you. Please.
I'm really interested in the whole idea of morality. Beyond just a religious.
No, that's a great question. Thank you for asking. morality is so huge, and our natural law doctrines incorporate religious morality, but other forms of moralities. But one of the dominant moralities is religious morality, you see. And a lot of our beliefs actually come from our inner religious, thinking. And again, religious beliefs are also quite, it's a wide scope. What we, how do we define religion or beliefs? So in answer to your question, I would say that morality is, you're right, morality is very broad, but a core element of that, or a key element of that, is religious morality, because we certainly believe that certain things are inherent, and we want those inherent beliefs to be part of our, the way we live. And sometimes we want those to be formally incorporated into laws and regulations. So yeah, I mean, morality could be much wider than that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Some comment and maybe a question.
Yeah.
So going back to the moral value, and should the morals this moral will harm people, and they always have a lot of morals, and a lot of religious texts have been the interpretation, and as you know, and even after the Prophet's time, like maybe a few years after the death, some imams changed their fatwa when they changed to a different city, because this fatwa doesn't suit the city, or doesn't suit this time, or doesn't suit this. So I think that even I think at certain times, maybe us looking at certain things as more harming or not. So I think that at institutional level, sometimes if there is a big value might have to, for instance, if I go out shouting in the street, some people will consider this. If I violate my rights and start like going over the limits, then if that happens so much, I think that the law will start thinking about legislating something for that. Yeah. Same as for prosecutions, for example. I dealt with so many organizations that it went to a level that there was, and they went to into a movement here in Ireland. Start seeing the harm that caused was violated, and then the law interfered, and start thinking that this at this stage maybe they should. So harness to the other individuals.
Okay, thank you. Can I respond to that, or yeah? Okay, you make a very important point, but establishing harm is also quite open to interpretations, and it's a very challenging subject. So you have given examples of freedom of expression, which is it's a very problematic situation, no doubt, that it has to be balanced with a number of rights. For example, you can't defame people, you can't blaspheme, you have to respect society, you have to respect public order. So it has to be a balance, and it depends on how society views certain expressions, right? On the question of prostitution, you see, you make a valid point about these individuals themselves acknowledging the humiliating practice. But again, I go back to the issue of common morality amongst these individuals. To what extent can a state impose criminality on the whole profession if it's done with complete independence and non-exploitation, if it is treated as a decision which is like a profession and there is no abuse and an individual wants to do that? Should the state still enforce criminality? That's the question. I mean, should the state as a ground for harm to the society? That's the point, you see, because harm has so many permutations. I mean, you can harm yourself in so many ways. Like, I mean, if I decide to eat hamburgers all the time, right, and junk food, which maybe some of us do, if we eat so much of junk food, I can harm the society, because then when I become sick, I will have to be taken to the hospital, and then resources will be invested on that. Or if I become, and there are many people who are alcoholics and they become a burden on the health service. So you can say that they are harming, but should the state then say, okay, we will ban people eating hamburgers because it's not good for your health, it will harm you and it will harm the society? Or should the state say, oh, sugar is not good or salt is not good because it raises blood pressure, we will start penalizing people who eat more than a certain amount? So there's so many permutations of harm, but I was talking more in a specific context where where morality and harm are contentious.
And totally.
Yeah.
That's why I said I think it is sometimes when it is in institution. Than when it is at the individual level.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks for the presentation, but it was very interesting. And I have a bit of a counter argument to what you. Prescriptions and prescriptions. Yeah, so like.
Yeah.
It wouldn't make sense to us as a community.
Yeah, so that's a good question. But what I'm saying is, as a broad feature, even those prescriptions that you mentioned, they're part of the morality, unless they become law, you see. So for example, we have canon law, right? Canon law, which means that there is a law for the clergy, they apply that. I mean, that has emerged from morality, but that has been regulated in the way Christian clergy operate, right? So there would be some experts in canon law, and they can correct me here. But that once that has become law, it has to be recognized in some form as part of positive law. Otherwise, it's still part of morality. Do you see what I mean? So canon law would be recognized. I mean, I don't know if there are some Italians here or some other experts who work on canon law. That law, although it is specific to the clergy, is recognized in the legal framework of the state system. Do you understand? Otherwise, it is just morality. I mean, if I am prohibited, let's say, as a Muslim, not to drink alcohol, right? This is a prescription. But what stops me from drinking alcohol? Unless the state makes a law, as in many countries it does. So ultimately, you have to go through this decision by the state, whether it wants to transform religious morality into some forms of prescription. Yeah. 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 Sorry. So follow, please, Roger. You can. Yeah. Let's continue the thread. Yeah.
Sorry for ahead of you. I think if kind of there's morality and then law, and when you're talking about law, there's something like a state, but does it have, for example, minorities within majority contexts? So, for example, Muslims in Europe.
Yeah.
So there are communities who would, you know, and this is where morality and law can be conflated in some ways. But how can you distinguish between? For example, if you're talking about Sharia councils, like if there might justice, and they're going to, you know, they're not going to the state, they're going at the community level. And so it has a legal, but it's not the law of the state.
Yeah, it's a good question, and actually we did some work on Sharia councils. They're quite problematic, you know, in undermining, in many ways, undermining women's rights. So the answer to your question is that unless there is a rule of recognition which recognizes, and I do apologize, I'm using this terminology taken from a famous jurist, H.L.A. Hart, that unless that moral basis is recognized through certain legislative processes or lawmaking processes, it is morality. So the informal or the Sharia councils, they are actually not lawful unless they're given recognition either through some judicial framework, some legal constitutional framework. They would just be in the realm of morality. So you can ignore them, you can undermine them, and there would be no legal consequences for that. Yeah, I have thought about it, and I have asked many questions to myself and to others. Unless they become part of the constitutional and legal framework, they are recognized within the legal framework. So in Afghanistan and Pakistan, we have the Jirga system, which has recognition in our legal system. Unless that happens, they are just morality-based or informal ways of settling disputes. So they would have no legal basis unless they're recognized in that way. So, yes.
Yeah, this is off topic from the conversation on dominant target audience of your or that's morality, that Sharia is morality and it shouldn't be law and reform, but how would you contextualize it in a way that they would accept it? Government that is has a theocratic, like has a constitution that is based on Sharia. I agree that Sharia is morality.
Yeah, no, this is a very significant challenge that I have. Not only states, but even my academic colleagues or others who work in the area, that Sharia is basically a moral interpretation. So it's a big challenge. I'll give you two examples to substantiate and the problems which states have. One is where, if you look at state practices, they use the word Sharia, but they do not understand the meaning of Sharia. If they understood the meaning of Sharia, then we would have a totally coherent application of Sharia in state practices. So take the position of women in Sharia compliant states. In some states, women are free to wear what they like. There's no prohibition, for example, there's no injunction to cover their heads to wear hijab, but in some instances there is. Take the case, I just gave you all these examples. So take the case of age of marriage. Now, why why is such a deviation in Sharia compliant states on the ages of marriage or on the roles relating to the marital status and the position such as custody and guardianship of children? Because these are moral doctrines. Even I have considered some very rigid Sharia laws, like for example, inheritance, right? I mean, the shares are stated in the Quran, so and most jurists agree. Even there, these are moral values, because the Quran, the Holy Quran, by its very definition of what I've told you of law, it's not law. It cannot be law. It's a divine text. It is not devised by a political authority. It is not positive law. So it has to be moral. It has to be a moral interpretation. And the other final point I want to make to you is that, you see, if you look at the various international instruments, the various treaties that these Muslim countries have signed, they say it has to be Sharia compliant. Now, what does it mean, Sharia compliance? So what does it mean when the OIC Charter or the other human rights treaties, they say anything that is contrary to Sharia? It is non-explicable. They can't explain. You ask these statesmen, what do you explain? They say, oh, it's Sharia, but there's no explanation. So it is quite ambiguous, in that sense.
And then I see we have somebody online, but following your train of thought of moralities and things that guide understanding good or bad behavior. You're talking about morality that informs laws, right? Whether they be religious or secular, kind of informs all the basis, right, for law. But you've mentioned now a couple of times, or referred back to the democratic lawmaking process, right, of how laws are made. We also have room for customary law, which is not codified. Right, and I was just wondering so it's a little bit interesting, like as an example, in our Marriages Act, we have marriages which are sometimes it's a whole thing. But anyway, in South Africa we have and that's by your definition of kind of how laws are made, just what's written down. I'm just wondering what you thought there, because sometimes we also have this question of law, but then by your definition, would customary law that's not written down, codified, would it meet your definition here?
Yeah, okay. Well, there are many important points in the points that you made.
Sorry.
So I just want to say a few things. You see, when you say good or bad behavior, I mean, again, this is a moral judgment. For me, I mean, let's say eating junk food could be bad behavior, but for someone else, it could be just neutral or good behavior, right? Alcohol consumption could be, for somebody, could be normal behavior, but for another person could be morally bad behavior, taking drugs. So that the point that you made. On the issue of customary laws, right? Again, I think these are interconnected aspects. And what Roja just mentioned about the Jirga system and the tribal system, they're also customary. So the question for us is the legal system cognizant of these customary laws, and does it in some way recognize these institutions? If it does, then it is part of the legal system. But if it doesn't, then it is morality that determines that. So if the customary law, and in many societies, customary laws are part of the legal framework. And I would say that in the South African constitution, as you've explained, that is recognized because the constitution itself would recognize the framework of these laws, right? There was another interesting question about, I think it was about different minority or different communities, but perhaps we can discuss that if there are other questions related to that.
Oh, I have any questions.
Yeah, so we can, yeah.
But I think we had someone with their
Oh, yes.
hand went down, so I'm not.
They can still, yeah. Hassan, yeah.
He can unmute himself.
Actually, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
So Hassan, if you unmute and ask your question, please.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much, and I'm really delighted to see Professor Javaid, though virtually. Well, you explained the lawmaking procedures, and then you also talked about secular law. I believe there is also, because of the language issue, when we call something a secular law, we probably people do not necessarily mean that the law, how the law is defined, let's say from a secular perspective, because we don't have other word except, well, saying it about the law other than Sharia law. We say Sharia law or secular law, and that is probably because of the language. And as you also said that, well, the Sharia, I mean, or the law, the Prophet Muhammad, whatever he was receiving, and he was telling that, well, Prophet Muhammad, whatever he was receiving, that are all reflected in the Quran and the Holy Book of Quran. But Prophet Muhammad was not receiving everything from the God to say. There were certain things that he was receiving, and there were certain things that he was not receiving from God, but he was also telling that as a positive thing, as a positive social, behavior, telling about that. And he does not, in Prophet Muhammad was certainly not saying, definition of secular thing you said. So this is, I think, I this is more a end of language, I think. And one another about and I think this is confusing because morality was one with human beings, and then religion came after. So
Thank you, Hassan. If you can stress, if that's the end of your, we lost a little bit at the end, but I think we got the main crux of your question.
I'm sorry. I think I'm having my internet problem. I get disconnected. I was saying that morality is much older than the religion. So when we say religious morality, I think we're confusing the two things, because religion is separate than morality, and there are morality aspects that has the backing of religion. I think it's not. I disagree with religious morality with this term. I think there are certain aspects of morality that has the support and the backing of religion, because morality is much older than the religions. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Hassan. Thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. I'll just briefly respond to you. I think I would agree that that morality encapsulates religion, and it is true that morality can be older than religion, but religion itself is subject to such big interpretation. What is religion? What is your belief? You could have a belief in something which we don't interpret as religion. So morality encapsulates so many things, including your religious beliefs. But what I'm saying is that your religious morality or your religious belief is a very strong initiator for you to change the laws, because you're so entrenched in your religion as the ultimate divine truth. And that creates an issue in terms of its compatibility to human rights laws.
Yeah, so I was wondering that you're saying Sharia is morality in that law. I'm wondering whether there's also danger in it as well, because like moral psychology, and there's also defining that moral, it is almost like a symptom effect, like things, of course, to translate it into policies and whatsoever, and kind of, or maybe like moving to an example, it's easier. Traffic lights. So if I have a law that says to me I can't cross the street when it's red, if I cross it anyways, if it's just a law, I don't actually mind. I can. It needs to be more important. I can't ignore it.
Yes, sometimes, and certainly in many societies, morality plays a big role. It plays a larger role, or it can play a very important role in human behavior, because it's not necessarily determined by law, the positive laws, but it derives from our inner beliefs. As you said, we think about the consequences. We think about others. You see, we think about the people we love, our friends, our society and community. We don't do these things because we think that they're not good for them. I am saying that yes, you can follow that, but law must have a certain role to play. And you have to determine the limits of law, because law will bring about certain consequences. If, let's say, if you do something which is immoral and not unlawful, then the consequences will be emotional. You feel distressed, right? Or others will feel distressed. But if you break the law, then there will be some legal consequences. There will be some more permanent consequences. So what I have been saying is that there is a distinction between moral behavior and law. And law should only interfere when it actually affects or impacts or harms individuals, not because we think that this is an immoral practice and we should stop that. Mm-hmm.
How do you country or the other country has legal opposite there?
Yeah.
And how do you?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. You see, law you can always establish. There are certain elements. If you look at them in every country, there is a way of making the law, right? So whichever country you mentioned, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Pakistan, Indonesia, there is a way of making law. Now that is not the problem. The problem, I think, what you have identified is the morality behind the law. That, I mean, in some instances, you can justify honor killing. That's an extreme example. But there are laws where which exonerate honor killing. Do you understand honor killing? Like, if you like yeah. So that is an extreme example. Or child marriages. You see, why do they make these laws? Because they believe, some kind of moral belief is there that this is the right thing to do, you see. So the problem is not with the law, with the positive framework, because you have to have a positive law, right, if you want to have a legal system. But then what is behind that lawmaking process?
I want to know that, for example,
All of it. Yeah. No, of course, yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I think there was some.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have kind of the same question as you, but more in terms of the term that you mentioned as the positive law. Who is the harm or the only connotation that should identify whether positive or negative, and who does that, you know?
Yeah. So when I meant positive law, I actually meant laws which are enforceable. But these laws emerge, they come from a political authority. They are not from some doctrine, or they are not from people who do not have the power. So they establish a system whereby that this person can make a law and that person can enforce it, you see. So take the case of Afghanistan now. You know who is the lawmaker, right?
Yeah.
You know the political authority. They can make the laws, right? And you may agree or disagree with the laws that they are making, but you know that they are making. They can make the law because they have the authority to do so. And people have to follow those laws.
Yeah. Now, would that be a positive law or a negative law?
All laws will always be positive laws. I mean, the reference to positive is not the characteristic of the law itself, but the characteristic of the lawmaking,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
The tiny follow-up. So you were responding to her question, giving the example of, and obviously this is the whole point. Child marriage, honor killings, and how you said the lawmakers, I don't know what you said exactly, but like will justify whatever by they think it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's the right. Yeah.
I'm just curious though, do you always think that is part of the process? Because like, do you always think, because sometimes sometimes the instances that these decisions laws are enforced that are informed by something, but like when somebody is enforcing, say, honor killings or child marriage, do you think that there might be another thing that is being served, be it economic or choose any?
Of course.
I was wondering, do you think it's always?
Yeah, well, you would remember when I said that there is always a morality behind a political decision to make a law, right? So the morality can be of all sorts, and I gave that example of traffic signal, right? Yeah. That is, I mean, in my understanding, there's no religious morality involved in that, right? But there is some kind of, there must be some rationality or some reason, right? So the same with, child marriages or something. It seems likely that it is driven by an ideological position derived from religious morality. But there are all sorts of moralities, and I would encourage you to look. I don't know if in Ireland you have the parliamentary debates on TV or parliamentary discussions, the bills when your parliament is discussing, so it's on television. So you should experiment what the politicians are talking about when they want to introduce a legislation. And there are all sorts of morality grounds that are presented. So there is something behind lawmaking, you see. It is inevitable that there is a reason why a law is made. A law cannot be made without a reason. I mean, even the whim of a dictator is a reason, you see. Let's say if I suddenly become the leader of Afghanistan, right? And I said, okay, I'm going to make the laws. Oh, I just like, blue-eyed women, and all of them will become school teachers or university teachers. even that whimful instruction has some reasoning behind that. Do you see? So that's my point. That there is a reason in lawmaking.
I don't know how to formulate it, but I will try to. If we speak about morality, we need to. So also you have your. But if other people will see you breaking a law that you're not caring about, you will feel the shame. And how much emphasis can we put on law if actually it depends on the people and the surrounding I'm in? So even if, but in closed rooms, we will do it anyway. Let's say red light. I've been in Dublin for 2 days, 1 day. I see people crossing the street all the time with a red light. I'm the only one standing. Of course I'm gonna cross as well. So how much can we trust and put morality not into law if at the end we're alone with other people in the vacuum and not with them?
Yeah. No, very, very important question. But again, there is a number of questions in there. Thank you for that. And I think the first point I understood from you, and I think it's important to say, so what do you do with morality? Can you actually change morality? I mean, like, for example, if we believe that, let's say on issues, some of the issues that we have discussed, if we start believing that all marriages should take place at the age of 18 and not 13 or even younger, how do you change? But if we say that this is morality and we want to change it, what would you do? And this is an open question. I'm not an expert, but perhaps there are ways to change our understanding. If we say that torture or corporal or physical punishments are inhumane, what do you do about that? Because, okay, there is a moral concept that you could do that historically. But I think we have to, if we want to change society and if we want to bring laws that are compatible, it has to start a long way back. We have to change morality. And that's why I think that morality is not static, as I mentioned to you. All those natural law doctrines have been said that they are there and they're divine, but it is not divine. It is subject to change. It's subject to our understanding. So I think that is the one point that I mentioned. And the other thing is, you mentioned about your experience in the 2 days of following the signals. But the question is, and again, I don't have an answer for that. But is law breaking also part of morality? You see, because in some societies, people regularly break the law as part of their moral belief that nothing will happen. And that is a question whether, how do we actually make people respect law? Because they regularly think that law is just an instrument which can be broken at any point without any consequences. So while morality and law are distinguishable, there is a big overlap because there are consequences if you breach morality, including law. Yeah.
Sorry, if we speak about also moralities and laws in different countries in which it happens, we have so many different moralities or ways in the same country. And for example, in some cultures, it's still considered, and it will be accepted by your surrounding, your friends, neighborhood, schools, because this is how you set it straight. And then if you will come to a society where it's not okay,
this is, if I can just say, on a jovial note, I was regularly punished physically at school when I was being raised in Pakistan. It was a common trait that my teachers would punish all of us with, sometimes with you know, they used to have sticks and all that. And when I used to come home, my parents would say, okay, well done to the teacher, because you got this smacking. So, so it is again a moral perception that we had, that we didn't have any laws. In fact, we still don't have any laws on corporal punishment, as you rightly said, in many countries. But the thing is that now, as a global community, we're coming to recognize that it is unhelpful. It destroys or it negatively impacts children. It doesn't improve them. You know, so it's a change in our moral thinking about what shall we do with young mischievous children and how do we discipline them. And again, unless we reform our moral thinking, laws would not be brought into place, or they would not be changed. So there is a deep connection between morality and law, but morality is very important. You know, how we think before we make the laws. Yeah. What was that? Yeah.
I'm really taking advantage of
Yeah.
sharing as well.
It's very important.
Definition
Yeah.
of morality,
Yeah.
because I still feel there's a like, you know, is there a difference between moral? So, you know, is morality more collective? Because I wouldn't have thought of that as morality. About the age of marriage as well, kind of, you know, like that one like example I can give of that is actually so in Iran the age of
Girls,
that's lunar years, so it's even lower, and 15 for boys, but this 9 and 15, and it was very top down. So this is the other thing as well. So they so they got other part of those, especially who were like they tried to use international human rights convention, because Iran is also party to the convention on the rights of the child. So again, like, you know, is that morality as well at the higher level? Baffled by this definition of how we are defined.
Yeah, it's a deep question, and I must admit I can't give you all of the answers, not so much, at least comprehensively. But what I will say to you is that everything that is not law is morals or morality. That is a broader answer. So once your morals are converted into law, then it becomes what I've just explained, positive law. But everything else, everything other than that, is actually, you can call it by whatever name. You can call it morals, morality, moral behavior, but it is discretionary. It's not law. Yeah. So
the behavior is not always moral.
It depends how you define behavior. I mean, what is morality? I mean, I have struggled to find a definition, but I can give you some references of some leading authorities who have defined morality, because that in itself is very problematic. You know, you have rightly raised this this question about the relationship of morality and morals, and the relevance of religious morality to morals. And I think there was another question here. I can give you a reference of a professor at Oxford, Tony Honore. I can't pronounce his name properly, but it begins with Honor. Professor Honore or someone like that. I have his reference, and he has defined how we perceive morality. And again, that is, I mean, morality is such a big subject. It's so inclusive. But the point is that it still has to be distinguished from law. That is the core element. Because if you don't distinguish morality, then you'll end up, if you don't distinguish morality from law, then we will end up with the same confusion that we find within the Muslim world, because they keep on talking about Sharia, but they don't understand whether it's morality or law.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, is
only through the medium of a political authority. I mean, if, let's say, we take the example of, I don't know, polygamy, right? Polygamy. Now, if it's customary practice in many countries, I mean, including mine, people do marry. But if it's not recognized by any legal institution, that would just be moral behavior. You know, you could call it good behavior or you could call it bad behavior, right? But it is a behavior that's not regulated under the legal framework. But if the state endorses, as it does in many cases, you will see that law is definitely there, even in those practices which we do not accept, such as polygamy or child marriage. There is some law somewhere which recognizes. Otherwise, this will just be, you know, this will just be practices which people follow without any legal instruments endorsing them.
The people who make law, international criteria, or it is up to the national level to choose people who make law. Because these people who can have the interpretation of whatever morals or Sharia or harmless, and that there is no sincerity, if there is no variety, if there is So if there is kind of criteria?
Yeah. Well, that's a very important question. It's it has so many permutations and consequences. I know there are esteemed international lawyers here, but my understanding of international law is that there is no criterion of a state being democratic. We are moving towards some kind of democratic order and soft law. But if a government that comes into power through political force, as we saw in the case of Taliban, for example, and they are completely undemocratic, so long as they are in charge of that country, they will be able to make laws, even though they violate human rights. And I mean, we have seen this so many times that. So there is it's very unfortunate. We should have, I mean, in the real world, we should be able to not recognize or delegitimize that process, which is undemocratic. But that's the reality. And I mean, we don't have any firm criterion, even in the developed world, of women representation. I mean, it's only I think it's only about 100 years that women were allowed to enter UK Parliament, for example. So these are all new developments. I mean, we still have many minorities that are excluded. We have, ethnic, religious, sexual minorities, which have no place in a democratic framework. So we have to go a long way. But as international law stands, we don't have any way of ensuring democracy in the national scene. Yeah.
And I want to know what is your opinion? All of the world culture, every tradition.
I think I briefly mentioned that morality is not uniform. People have different moralities, and they have had different moralities at different times. So I mentioned the Greeks, they believed in slavery, torture was acceptable, killing people was acceptable. But our morality has changed. But it doesn't mean that our morality has uniformly changed, you see. So take the example of right to life and take key controversial aspects. So, for example, abortion issue. Right? Morality is very different in many countries, and laws are very different. Because morality, and where does morality come from in terms of certainly, I mean, you can correct me, but abortion issues, there's a lot of religious morality that is inherent. I mean, there's conflictual, but that morality, the conflictual morality also derives, both concepts derives from religious elements as well. Take death penalty. You know. Now, who in this room, be frank, who in this room supports death penalty? I mean, I suspect in this room, there will be very few people who will be enforcing death penalty for any offense. But if I go back to Pakistan, or if I go back to Saudi Arabia or to Iran, there will be many more people because their morality is different, you know. And I don't blame those individuals because that is how they have grown up to believe in that morality. So it's the answer is it's not static, it's not uniform, it's subject to change, and that is why we have so much division in having moral views on everything that we have.
Can we maybe take one more question?
All right, okay.
What exciting topic.
Yes, but we have a famous politician who gives press conferences, but the condition is that the press would not ask any questions because there will questions. But I welcome, you know, because I learned with you. So thank you.
And parents will want them about both of them and the Sharia how to relate with that. Ask them, it is referred to the how they interpret these of sexuality between woman and man. They didn't direct to be clean, they're shameful and killing women. Even if they know they would be punishment from the government, they didn't consider for that. About these.
So you see, it's very interesting that there are very learned scholars who interpret homosexuality as natural. See, there are many writings, and they use religious sources. They use Sharia. Again, that is, you know, this goes back to the point I was making, that Sharia is open to interpretations. It's a moral understanding of how we should live, right? So those lesbian and gay scholars or proponents of those, they think that it's natural, it's God-given. God has made them like that. If there are other people who have heterosexual tendencies, God has made many people or a number of people with homosexual tendencies. So there should be no laws to punish those individuals. And they cannot but break the law because the law is made through a certain ideological position. So what I'm saying is that the law should not interfere when individuals are not harming the society. If they are adult individuals and they are making conscious decisions of, let's say, not entering into heterosexual marriages, and they want to have homosexual relations, why should the state punish them? What is the harm there? And it again goes back to the moral fabric of the society, because the states are threatened that if they allow that, maybe the morality will disappear, it will disintegrate, and the society will collapse. It wouldn't. It would just allow individuals to live their life. Okay, thank you.
So just one last question from Vladimir, and then
No, Rosa, it's fine.
Looking at the time.
Take more, yeah.
And yeah, so I have a background like in moral psychology, that's why
Yeah.
So behind
Yeah.
this, but, and I really like to much of what you said, but I also have some other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Of
I was
course.
wondering, with one of the things you just said, that for example, a lot of like kind of also in the US, like cultural, feel that it's not just about religion being the base behind that, but also so there, like in some theories would say it's more like this harm-based approach, but harms of different kinds, right? Or harm like purity or so, but also harm to individuals or authority. Also convince others that one harm is actually the one
concerned about. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's all about how we perceive certain activities, whether, I mean, in some instances, we would say that although the individual is harming himself or herself, in the wider framework, they are harming the society, right? So in the case of abortion, of course, it's not just the individual. It is, you know, if women are claiming the right to have abortion, it affects the other person as well. I mean, the unborn child. So you have to balance somehow the harm or the perceived harm to the mother and to the unborn child. I mean, I don't know where we stand in Ireland at the moment in terms of abortion rights. I mean, and what the laws are. Abortion is now is legal. Okay, all right. Okay.
Yeah, so it's become legal.
Yeah.
But there was.
There's been so much. It's been so much. It's so controversial, and we have so much controversy in the U.S. You know, overturning this Wade and Roe case. But it is. Sorry.
The law was passed by referendum.
By referendum, right? Okay. But still, I mean, even in a society, there is still controversy. But if you look at, for example, Council of Europe or European Union, there is no consistency on abortion laws. Take another example of voluntary euthanasia, where individuals make a decision to kill themselves or to allow another person to kill themselves. I mean, I don't know what the Irish position is, but in the UK, we still regard it as unlawful. If I say, to my family, or if other people are involved and I say, I want to die, can you help me die? That is still unlawful, you see. But compare that to other European countries, some of the other countries where this is permissible with some restrictions. So the moral views are very different. And the laws themselves are different, but it is all about balancing. It's not that straightforward what I've just said to you, that the harm principle should be the paramount one, because harm is interpreted in a very diverse way, how we interpret harm. So I hope that's
Thank you very much for.
Thank you for listening.